We're Hassani and Danielle Pettiford, and we're a real couple with real problems who almost called it quits.
I was very frustrated. I became very disconnected, very jaded and cold.
We have 4 children, going on 20 years of marriage, and we practice what we preach.
Our mission, to change the way couples relate to one another and teach them the skills needed to improve the quality of their relationships. This is the Couples Academy Show.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy Show. My name is Hassani. Good to welcome you all, whether you're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're just glad that you're a part of this conversation. This is the place where people all around the world hang out to talk about love, life, and relationships. We're in our communication series still because there's so many ways that we can approach this, so many angles, so many layers to pull back. So I hope that you're enjoying this conversation because we're going to go a little bit deeper today. Today we're talking about 10 things you should never do when communicating. Particularly we're talking about with your spouse, with your partner. You can apply these principles to your interaction with anyone, but we want you to be more intentional when it comes to your relationship because that's the one that matters the most. Your marriage is your primary relationship. All other relationships are secondary, tertiary, so on and so forth from there. And so if this one isn't in place, then good God, you know what I mean? That should be the focus. So in this communication conversation, we're going to dive a little bit deep. But before we get started, a couple quick announcements. Last Chance Weekend, next weekend, May 13th through the 15th. Foundry, we are now in the second week. We had a few more people who signed up. Tomorrow is the last day where you can do that. Unearthed starts this week, so there's a lot happening. We're glad that all of you are really diving in deep to really become the best versions of yourself, and glad that you are here with us. What we want to do before we get started, just watch this quick video, Last Chance Weekend. Some of you are watching for the first time. You're like, what is this thing? I keep hearing about this. What is it? Well, check it out, and we'll be right back.
Welcome to the Couples Academy app. The Couples Academy app is your go-to hub for how to do marriage right. Get started with our app today by perusing our amazing features that conveniently allow you to connect. This app is packed with powerful content and resources to help you grow and stay connected. With this app, you can watch our messages, find marriage resources, watch, listen, and read the real-life stories of restored couples, sign up for events, read articles and blog posts, stay up to date with push notifications, share your favorite messages via Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or email, and download messages for offline listening. For more information about the Couples Academy app, go to couplesacademy.org.
back, guys. We're back. All right. We're about to dive in. I do have a comment here. I just want to read this. Black Pearl Music says, my wife is being stubborn, saying that she doesn't understand how she may hurt me in the way we communicate. Maybe I haven't fully healed from my childhood. I have triggers. Well, that could certainly be an issue right there. Here's the reality. It's a two-way street, right? There's things that you do that contribute to where we are. There's things that I do that contribute to where we are. There's a hypersensitivity that we have to each other because of past hurts, past pains, all types of things. But if you haven't been able to effectively communicate to her what she's doing in the way that she communicates, this is why we say, listen, babe, let's turn off the television. Let's turn off all technology. Let's go to a different location. Let me tell you something. When Danielle and I have meetings, we can do it in our office, in our home, but sometimes we're like, you know what, let's get out of this environment. Let's go somewhere else, a different space. There's a different level of attention. There's a different level of focus because you don't have the normal everyday distractions of your environment, of the kids, of all the things that can get in the way. So this is zoned in approach. And what I would say is set up a meeting and let her know what the meeting's about. Listen, I want us to talk about our communication styles and some of the challenges that we're having. And why don't we do that this Thursday at 8 o'clock? We'll go somewhere. And why don't you write down some thoughts that you have that you want to discuss? I'll write down some as well. So we're both coming prepared, right? So we're not defensive. We're not on edge. We're not doing any of this. We're having a healthy conversation to really get to the root cause, because maybe changing the environment and changing the approach will allow you to hear me differently than how you've struggled to hear me before. But a part of that, in addition to identifying what may be wrong in the way that your spouse communicates, is really looking at your own deficits. You said that there's some childhood stuff there. You said that there are some triggers that you do have. And so in some respects, we may project on others what we really struggle with ourselves. So we've made our spouse take ownership for problems that are really internal. And this is why we say this internal work is so necessary. Becoming the best version of yourself is so necessary. The key to your marital restoration is your personal transformation. Your personal transformation is necessary because at the end of the day, no matter how much I complain, I can't change the way you communicate. I can't change how you show up. I can't change your reactions. I can't change your tone. I can hope, wish, want, pray, but I can't change it. The only thing that I have complete control over is me, and I struggle to change me. So if I'm struggling to change me, how am I going to be able to effectively change you? So this is where personal responsibility and accountability comes in. This is where being a part of something larger than yourself. This is where, as I keep saying, become a student of the thing that you struggle with the most, because the more you unpack it, the more you learn it, the more you know the ins and outs of it, the more effective you will be in your approach. Does that make sense? Shalise, man, the questions are coming in the comments. How do you temper my lack of trust when communicating with my husband? I've given him a last chance, but I struggle with keeping my anger and sadness hidden so that I can, that's part one, communicate with the right tone and attitude. Help me, please. I need to show up better now, even though I have just had my 4th D-Day 3 days ago since November. Are you doing this alone? You're doing your D-Day for the 4th time? Are you doing this alone? Are you leading this conversation? Are you in the driver's seat? Is he? Is there a third party involved in this process? If not, there needs to be. That will be the way that you can get out of the struggle that you're having, because now you have someone else who's listening, because they're going to hear something different than what you hear. They're going to hold him accountable, you accountable, and they will guide and navigate the conversation. Because if you're in the driver's seat, there may be this internal resistance that he has to answering your questions and doing what you want, and vice versa. But when you both submit to another individual, another source, when you both submit to that source, it helps. That's what we had to do, because we were stuck. We were in a tug of war, and we weren't willing to hear each other. We had to go somewhere else, to someone else that we valued and respected, and they were able to help us get unstuck and to get to a better place. Christina says, fantastic series. I was praying about communication, and now we both watch daily. It is always good to learn better communication skills. Thank you, Hassani and Danielle. We appreciate you. So let's dive in. We're talking about 10 things you should never do when communicating, guys. Let's go to number 1. All or nothing thinking. Some of us are very closed-minded, narrow-minded. It's either this or that. It's either right or wrong. It's either up or down, in and out, left and right. And there's nothing in between. And that is simply not true. There are more ways to looking at things than the way that you look at things. And though you look at things through the lens of this is right and that is wrong, doesn't make it so. You believe this is the truth, this is the lie, but it's your truth. That's what a perspective is all about. You're looking at things through a certain vantage point, though there are other sides to this equation that you may not have considered. And so it's very difficult to really have a conversation with someone when they are very narrow in their approach and they have all or nothing thinking, because it leaves you with no room, right, or no space to be able to offer something that may make sense, that may contribute to the conversation. So rather than me talking about your spouse and how they're showing up, I'm talking directly to you. If you're that individual that has all or nothing thinking, and that's your approach to relationships, I encourage you to really, really let that go and understand that when God created your spouse, he created your spouse different on purpose, with uniqueness, with individuality, with self-expression, with their own voice, on purpose. Because if you two were just alike, then one of you would become obsolete. So you need the other person. You need the other perspective. You need the other view to give you a more comprehensive understanding of how you should approach life together. So all or nothing thinking is something you definitely want to do without. Let's go to the second one. Number 2, overgeneralizations. Overgeneralizations. This is a huge one. When we overgeneralize, we may view an event as a never-ending pattern of defeat, right? So if we've experienced a defeat in our lives, we may overgeneralize and assume that it's all a failure. It's all wrong. It's all a wreck. When we've gone through hardships with our spouse in particular spaces, we then take that thing and cast a wide net and say it's all. And so this is a problem. When you overgeneralize, it's almost like you're giving that person no room to be any different than the way that you choose to view them. And so now you have them trapped. You put them in a box. You put them in a prison. They're now imprisoned to your overgeneralization, your perception, your way of seeing things, and they can't be anything other than what you choose to say. And it goes back to the whole concept we've talked about before, confirmation bias. I'm looking for something to confirm the bias that I have about you. And my bias is that overall, for the most part, in general, when I think about you from beginning to end, A to Z, this is who you are. This is what you do. This is what we have. Overgeneralization can be problematic because you never take the time to really acknowledge the good things. Because to your point, everything is bad. And it's been bad for the last 15, 20 years. I can't think, really? For the last 15 to 20 years, things have been bad. Why have you stayed? What about the celebrations? What about the anniversaries? What about the birthdays? What about the vacations? What about the moments that we stole to do this and do that? And so when you overgeneralize and paint this picture as if it's all bad or all wrong or no good, it's very demotivating. It really is. It causes people to want to consider, to be tempted with the idea of just throwing in the towel. Because like, what's the point? What's the point? And that's where people find themselves. All right, let's go to the third one. I hope this is helping. And if this is you, just be honest with yourself. Yeah, I overgeneralize. Yep. I do have all or nothing thinking, but let's continue. Mental filter. Do you have a mental filter in terms of your approach? In essence, you dwell on the negatives and you ignore all the positives. You see how these are cousins to one another, right? All of them blend into the other because this is what we do. And so when you combine overgeneralizations with a mental filter, it becomes problematic. So I look at life through a particular lens, and anything outside of this lens I completely ignore. And so all I see is just like a horse that has these blinders on. All I see is this. I'm not acknowledging none of that. I'm not talking about the good times. All I see is this, because this is my present reality. And guess what? Whatever I focus on grows. Whatever I become so focused and obsessed with, that becomes my reality. And so all the other things, it's just like they don't exist. Matter of fact, I'm not even sure if they ever existed. How discouraging, how demeaning, how minimizing. These are the things that we do when we're in a dark place. And the reality is we want to get out of this dark place, but we can't because of the way that we think, the mental filters that we put on. And so, guys, I'm trying to help you to unpack and to remove and to release things that are going on within you that cause communication problems. So it's not just your partner. Now we're talking about what internally is happening on the inside of you that causes you to communicate in such a negative way. Because these things that we're talking about impact how you show up. It impacts what you say. It impacts your disposition. Let's now go to the next one, because this is yet another cousin of what we just talked about. Discounting the positive. You see how these all blend together, but they're slightly different. Discounting the positive. You insist that your accomplishments or positive qualities just don't count, right? So the only thing that really counts around here is all the wrong that you've done. Yeah, okay, fine. You gave me flowers. All right, fine. You did something nice for my birthday. Fine, yeah, we had an anniversary. And so that meant so much less than all the problems, all the issues, the crisis that you brought to my front door. Like, that's what we focus on. So we discount all of that other stuff. And the only thing that becomes important is what you did that caused me to be in this space. And that impacts how I communicate. And so at some point, like, what room do I have in this relationship to do what's right and to have it acknowledged if you continue to see me the way that you've always seen me based upon these particular situations that have happened? And yes, they have happened, but how do we move beyond it? How do we get to a better place? How do we begin to shift gears and go in another direction if you continue to filter and think through the ways and means of which you think? Let's go to the next one. Hope this is helping. Here we go. Jumping to conclusions. Here we go. Because if I struggle to trust you, you better believe I'm going to be jumping to conclusions, right? So I'm going to read what this says because this is interesting. There's a couple ways of looking at this. Number one, mind reading, right? You assume that people are reacting negatively to you when there's no definitive evidence for this. You've just jumped to a conclusion. Or number two, fortune telling. You arbitrarily predict things will turn out badly, right? Because of things that have happened badly in the past. That is jumping to a conclusion. And so if you are focused on your past, now you're living there. You have a permanent address, and that's where you are. You've built a residence there. And because you're living in the past, you're experiencing that past event again and again and again. And what that does is that triggers a negative feeling and emotion that you stay trapped in. And because that is so much of your reality and it's been cemented in your consciousness, you then begin to anticipate a negative future outcome in the future. Because listen, what makes you any different than what you've done? What makes you any different than who you've been? Of course, you're going to continue to do. And so now you're predicting and jumping to a conclusion that it will always be the way it's been done in the past. And so it keeps your spouse trapped. And so you approach your conversation and interactions in this manner, and it keeps you in a spiraling dark pit of pain that you cannot get out of. I know that this is resonating with some people. I'm just going to go to the comments now just to see what they say. All right, so Lisa says, yesterday during the show, my husband texted me to tell me that he understood now what I was telling him about communication. He said that when verbal He said that when verbal assassin came up, the Lord convicted him right away. He apologized to me. Thanks, fam. I appreciate all the nuggets. I love hearing this because the verbal assassin, man, I'm going to tell you, is a real thing. If you want a serious deep dive into what a verbal assassin is, please, please, please get the book, The Audacity of Marriage, 10 Principles to Lifelong Partnership, because in that second chapter, chapter 2, Help My Mouth is Killing My Marriage, we spend a good chunk of that book really unpacking the verbal assassin and identifying all the characteristics of what that is, because many people may be a verbal assassin unknowingly, and it manifests in different ways. It's not just one particular thing. It's a variety of different things. But when you understand what it is, then you can begin to walk in it. Someone says, Kay says, do you have any book recommendations on communication? Well, The Audacity of Marriage, 10 Principles to Lifelong Partnership, because though chapter 2 is Help My Mouth is Killing My Marriage, chapter 3 is Resolving Conflict in Your Marriage, which is a part 2 to the communication piece. See, not only do you struggle to communicate, you don't know how to resolve any issues because you don't know how to communicate. But outside of that, I've been saying again, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's the book that you want to read. It is an international bestseller. It's definitely sold over 10 million copies. It's been out for decades. It is truly, truly, truly phenomenal. All right. Here we have another question. When does the past become the past? Is 3 days ago the past? Do I have a right to focus on the events of 3 days ago? Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, a minute ago is the past. But if the past is still relevant to the present, then you have to deal with the past. If something happened 3 years ago, okay, and a spouse is still exhibiting behaviors in the present, it's worthy of talking about. Or if something happened 3 years ago, but you haven't dealt with it, you haven't talked it through, you haven't brought resolution to it, then you have to deal with it, because you can't move into your future without first addressing your past, right? So the spouse just wants to move forward. That happened so long ago. Why are we still talking about this? Because we never really brought closure to it. And if you truly want to move forward and not deal with this anymore, then let's comprehensively deal with it. But many of us are we're stubborn. No matter what I say, no matter what the books say, no matter what the videos say, the sermon says, no matter what the counseling says, you still don't do it. You still want to do things your own way, right? So you pick and choose what you're going to do. You pick and choose what's appropriate for you. And you're consuming all of this information and doing nothing with it. You're not doing the work that's necessary to get you past your past. Okay, so if you want to move, and see, both of you want to move forward, but one is stuck. And when you take the time of doing the work and digging deep and unpacking all that has occurred and bringing resolution to it, then you can close that chapter, you can close that door, and then begin to move forward into your future. That's how this thing works. And so once again, what are we talking about? Communication. We're talking about communication and how we need to show up. And if we don't show up the right way, things will continue to get progressively worse over the course of time. All right, let's go to the next thing that you should not do when communicating. Magnification or minimization. All right, so that's making things big or making things small. And I think I've shared with you in times past about the binocular effect. How when you put on a pair of or when you put binoculars to your eyes, turn it one way, it becomes huge. Turn it another way, it becomes small, like the lenses are going in and out. And oftentimes we have a tendency of minimizing. We minimize what we do. We don't acknowledge it. When we're called out for things that obviously the world knows that we're responsible for, we don't even acknowledge it. We minimize it. We shift gear. We put it back on you. And not taking ownership for what was done forces your spouse to now maximize it. And so the best approach would be just to own it, to acknowledge it, and for you to maximize it. Because when you maximize what you've done, your struggles, your sins, your faults, your flaws, you've just stolen the voice Rob your spouse of their ability to complain about it because you've already done it. Like, what can you say? Like, think about a child when they do something wrong and they take no ownership of it. Like, they don't even acknowledge it. You have to force them because they're your child, and either you're going to admit it or you're not going to eat. You're going to admit it or I'm taking your technology away. You need to acknowledge what you're fine, I did it, that whole thing. Won't own it. And so oftentimes in relationships, our spouses just won't own it, or they minimize it as it being no big deal. And what that does is it is such an attack. It's just like, wait a minute. You're adding insult to injury now. Now you're forcing me to make a big deal out of it because you've made it no big deal. But when you make it a big deal, like when your child does something wrong and you can feel and sense that they really feel sorry for what they've done and it's bothering them. I remember when I was teaching my daughter to drive, I think it was maybe the third time, we're in the car and we pull into this, parking lot, and we pull up to the bank and we go through the drive-through, and she crashed into the darn wall. And I'm just like, I had an instant reaction, and I'm just like, but she's bawling, she's in tears, she's crying, she's hyperventilating because she crashed the car. I mean, it wasn't that bad. But the point is, she felt so impacted by what she did. And she saw my reaction, and immediately the overwhelm of emotions. And immediately I just shifted gears. I'm like, babe, it's okay. Don't worry about it. The fact that she made a big deal about it, I didn't have to. And I said, listen, the only way that we can overcome this, you got to get back in this drive. Because she didn't want to drive anymore. She wanted to get in the passenger seat and let me drive. I said, nope. You got to get back in here, because if you don't get back in this car, in this driver's seat, and continue to drive, it'll now get in your head. And now you'll approach driving from a defeatist perspective. So get back in this car, get behind this wheel, and let's keep on going. That happened. Let's move forward. And I was willing to just let it go, even though I had a situation on my car. It meant less to me because of the ownership that she took over that situation. When we learn to do that in relationships, it really makes a difference. It's a significant difference in how our communication goes. Guys, I hope this is helping. I'm going to go to another comment. I want to trust my spouse after the infidelity, but I'm unsure of letting down my guard and becoming vulnerable again. Thank you, Mary, for that. We're talking about communication today. You're talking about trust after infidelity. We'll get to that. We're going to unpack that. But we're talking about communication. Now, what I will say is that your ability to trust has everything to do with how you communicate through the issues that you're going through in your relationship. If your spouse is not willing to talk, if your spouse is not willing to be open and honest and transparent about what has happened, if you don't show up to the conversation the right way, then it's going to lead to a shutdown and reinforce more of the same distrust that you have in your current relationship. So we don't want to do that. But guys, I've given you a couple. There's more to go, but we've reached the end of the show. But in the meantime, chew on what I've just given you. And I want you to self-assess. Am I showing up this way? Is this me? Can I take a better approach to how I begin to communicate? As I'm talking about these 10 things that I should not do when communicating, where do I line up? How many do I identify with? Listen, we're going to go in a little bit deeper tomorrow, so stay tuned for part 2 as we continue to unpack this show's topic. But in the meantime, have a great day. See you in the morning. Take care.